Hi friends, welcome to Maple and Ash. I'm Allura, and today I'm going to be making this dress. We're going to a belegarth event, or LARP, and I don't have a lot of garb or clothes to wear, so I wanted to make something, and I wanted it to be epic. I found this pattern on Etsy. It was less than $8. I'll put a link down below where you can get it yourself. This is my first time making something this intricate, and this is my first time using a pattern to make something like this. So I was definitely intimidated. The first step is to print the pattern. This one is 72 pages long, so once you tape them all together, it is really big. I didn't get any clips of this because I don't want to show too much detail of the pattern pieces, because if you want to make this dress yourself, then you should buy that pattern from the artist that made it. With all of the pattern pieces taped together and basically a giant piece of paper, I set out to cutting out all of the pieces. Since this was my first time making a project this big, I wanted to make a mock-up, so I used some old bed sheets and threw it together. Let's see how it looks. All right, so this is the mock-up. The seams are pretty wobbly because my tension was terrible, but I wasn't too focused on that. I was more focused on making sure that it fits and learning how all of the pattern pieces go together. So yeah, the pattern does not have seam allowance included. So what I did to cut out these pieces was carefully measure 1 centimeter around every pattern piece and then cut along that line. But when using that line as my guide on where to sew, I didn't like it. My seams weren't lining up how I wanted them to, and it just didn't look super great. So I definitely wanted to change how I was going to cut out the fashion fabric. Okay, as you can see, the seams on the back were not lining up super great, and that is because of that seam allowance. So I will be changing that, but the mock-up as a whole turned out pretty okay. So let's just move on to the fashion fabric. Since I wanted to change how I was cutting it out, I decided this time to just trace around all of the pattern pieces with a yellow chalk line and estimate the 1 centimeter seam allowance just while I was cutting it. This way, when I was pinning the pieces together, I was making sure that the pin went through both chalk lines of whatever pieces I was putting together. As long as I keep my seam down that yellow chalk line, once it's pressed and the right sides are facing out, all you're going to see is the full pattern piece. So this proved to be also a good amount of work, but it really was worth it in the end. I made sure to snip all of the ends of my seams while I was going as close to the seam as possible. That way, when I had my finished project all put together, then I didn't have to go around and cut all of these fray threads. I also made sure to iron all of my seams flat. I ironed the seam allowance open rather than to one side, and this really helped all of the seams look so smooth and polished and nice. This is something that in the past I never really bothered with, but it really does make a difference. Katsu helped with this project a lot. Thanks to the time spent lining up all of my pieces, these are how the seams turned out. And they're not perfect, but they're a lot better than the mock-up. This pattern calls for a lining, and I decided not to include it because of time constraints. And thanks to those time constraints, I had to finish the project at the event. So I was at a park bench cutting the holes and hammering grommets in for the sleeves. Since I didn't include a lining, it would have been good to have a different type of seam, for example, French seams. That way I wouldn't have the raw edges out. Because with wool, that can be very itchy, and it is pretty itchy, but I definitely will in the future be adding a lining to it, so I'm not too worried about it right now. Thanks to my cat's supervision and the last minute additions, the dress was now complete. So let's check out how it looks.